The processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they're opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in. If somebody walked up to you and they had something you had never ever seen before in your life, and they're just simply calling it a bullet carrier, there are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works.
If you can just tell about what, when and where and what you saw, and just go through what you directly saw and experienced.
You got it. First and foremost, let me just let everybody know, I spent an entire year at the South Pole Station on the maintenance crew. And the IceCube Neutrino Detector was simply one facility of many that I paid attention to there. And in that process, I obviously learned the science and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo that people don't really need to know about, but that's the pretense that it's presented to the world, that the National Science Foundation cut a check for this facility at the South Pole Station and is doing science, wonderfully complex science. But what I have come to find out is that this device, not only is it a passive observational scientific device that is massive and embedded in the ice at the South Pole, it also transmits. I provided documentation for it. Anybody can look it up now. It is referenceable on the internet. I call it the DOM document, and it's on the archives at my website. But what it states is that this device, which has 5,160 DOMs, which is a digital optical module. The idea is that it's observing the neutrino interaction when it hits the nucleus of an ice molecule down there. That's what it's supposed to be built to do. But I found in the paperwork that each of these DOMs also can transmit up to 2,047 volts per DOM. That makes this a giant, powerful, active phased array system, which I am now doing due diligence to let the world know what that means. And the possibilities list is huge.
Well, so before we go out too far into that, let's deal with the basics here, is what I was wanting you to talk about.
You got it.
I know you were there working for Raytheon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go through that. You were assigned there for a year working with Raytheon. It was year X to Y. I mean, just, the whole thing before we get into a lot of the technical.
You got it. So so November of 2010, I landed on the ice at McMurdo Station and was rapidly deployed further south to 90 degrees at the South Pole Station. I stayed there for the 365 days. That employment, that time period, I guess, was for the summer season. We had we peaked out at close to 280 personnel at the site in the summer season. The winter season, we went down to 49. And the neutrino detector was something that I was pretty much obligated to go out to every single day. The equipment was so much. This is another thing that I learned that's peculiar, is there's actually so much computer processing equipment. Remember, this is the South Pole Station in the wintertime. My job required me to go out there, and people laugh at me for this and get mad, but I say it. We had chicken wire on an air inlet duct, like a snorkel duct, that the snorkel side went up and connected to the building, and there was louvers there that were temperature activated louvers. So the processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they're opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in to keep these computers cold. People really, think about that. This is a building it's sometimes minus 80 degrees outside. To think that you need that type of cooling capacity. And that was what my job was to make sure this building wasn't overheating in the middle of winter at the South Pole.
And why don't you describe, I know you've told me before, but for the audience, the size, the depth of the array, how big it was, how far down under the ice it was, et cetera. See, again, I want to get, so people have a visual of what we're talking about here, because otherwise, none of this makes any sense. So you got to, let's paint a picture of the facility, the size of the array, how deep it was, Was it operational when you got there, or was it operational later? All that detail.
You got it. So first and foremost, the central facility where all the processing happens, sitting atop the ice at South Pole Station, which is 10,300 feet actual elevation, and that is ice above Earth. So the IceCube drillers first had to go and drill. They would steam drill down and go basically 2 miles down, close to a 32 to 34 inch diameter hole, and they would drop a string cable down with all of these DOMs on it. Each one of those holes was drilled down, and it was drilled in a giant hexagon that covered kilometers of area in a length and width dimension, and then as far as the depth, going all the way down close to Earth at approximately 2 miles down to that. And everything was cabled and went back to the central building where all the processing computer server towers were and all that stuff. And that was the facility that was being accessed every day and made to be chilled.
Now, apparently this was being built and developed by Raytheon. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In the season that I was there, which was fall 2010 was when I arrived. We transitioned. It was right around, I think, January or February that IceCube officially transitioned from construction to operations and maintenance. Same thing with the elevated station itself, actually, that year.
Okay. And the system, what were the people there told about why it was there and what it was doing, allegedly?
The intended purpose for the IceCube Neutrino Detector was to detect neutrinos through the muon creation, which was when a neutrino coming from anywhere, in any direction, it could be from the other side of the planet, from off planet, through the planet, it doesn't matter. But when any of those neutrinos smashes into the nucleus of the water molecule, which is in the extremely pure ice. There's nothing else in there. So that's kind of why they're doing it, because they know it's a concentration of something specific, which is just pure water. Great product. When it hits the nucleus, there's two things that occur. A blue flash of light, and the neutrino and the nucleus are destroyed, and a new product called a muon is created. The detector is searching for the blue flash of light. So whatever direction it comes from, it would make like a blast through the array, that when it would hit the nucleus, it would be like a reaction through all of the different DOMs, because they're optical modules and they're receiving at that point. On the receiving end, there's just a bloom that shows up in the array. And from that bloom and the amount of light that hits each DOM, they can triangulate the direction from which the neutrino came from. Mm-hmm. I was told that they would then take that information, transmit it to all the different telescopes in the world, and then that would allow them to then look, because they're so curious as to what neutrinos are and where they come from.
Mm-hmm. And so that was what they were telling you, is that this was a observation technology related to astrophysics or astronomy somehow.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah. And what did you discover it actually is used for?
Quite much more. The ability to transmit is a big deal, and I know a lot of people may not necessarily understand what that means. So I want to paint a picture for them. It's one thing to say that, and the government does this all the time, they sidestep stuff. It would be like if somebody walked up to you and they had something you had never ever seen before in your life, and they were just simply calling it a bullet carrier. It's a bullet carrier, it carries bullets. But if they never told you it's a pistol or a handgun, they're being rather deceptive in what that thing does. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I now look at the IceCube Neutrino Detector, is that this is a savagely different device from what I was presented. And I'm trying to express to the world what that means, because it is absolutely a very big deal.
So you're convinced it was also had not only data gathering, but also offensive weapon capability.
I'm absolutely suggesting that is still on the list of things to check into. I'm a firm advocate of Occam's razor, that every possibility is left on the table, and I have to assess each one. And the split second I can negate something as a possibility, I will apply Occam's razor, cut it off, and remove it. But so far, everything that's left on the table is still possible.
No,
there's a lot.
Yes, there is. Yeah, and we can get into that in a moment. But I'm trying to stick with the things that are factually happened and observed, and then we can talk about implications and our assessment in a moment. You told me a very interesting thing that happened the instant they switched this system on. The New Zealand event.
I have a high suspicion that this is when it was going active and they were dialing things in, and that they caused the Christchurch accident. That was
you're referring to the earthquake.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I believe that they were dialing it in, and there was a high probability that was just misfire.
And a side effect. See, one of the things that people, just to give a little background, a lot of people have heard me refer in the past of scalar and longitudinal electromagnetic energy, which, just give people, not to geek out too far here, but when you look at a normal light wavelength, there's a wave to it like this, and a laser is coherent light where all the green spectrum is lined up. When you're doing something with the longitudinal scalar waves are actually a point that goes out longitudinally without the wave, and is much faster than the speed of light, literally, and the normal speed of light is still light, it's still electromagnetic field, but it also can be weaponized. So the early one of the euphemisms that are used, you were talking about the euphemism of this being some kind of like a bullet carrier, when really it's a gun. People don't realize that when J. Edgar Hoover was written to by the field agent there in Roswell, the memo we have that's now become the most viewed document on the FBI website officially states that there was a new, quote, radar array at Roswell. In fact, what that is often used at, people I have here, I'm in Washington right now, who worked in these systems, radar is often a euphemism or a catch-all phrase for not only a passive detection of an aircraft or bouncing waves off the metal skin of an aircraft, radar, but also an active warfare system, and they will piggyback them together. So this is a common motif. It's a pattern that I've seen over the last 30 years of working in this area. And I know that it's also true that the operational systems that were not only the neutrino light detectors on satellites in the, almost 50 years ago now, in the early mid 70s, those were, quote, slaved to active systems that were longitudinal scalar directional energy weapon type systems that would then lock on. Now, why is that important? When an interstellar vehicle is stepping down, let's call it, out of trans-dimensional space-time, resonating beyond the speed of light, matter, electrons as we think of it. That's that whole area of physics has been kept secret. When they are going from that into this dimension full on, the very first thing that happens is a big burst of neutrino light. And that's why the National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the really super secret satellite systems up in space wanted this man's invention and system back in the early 70s. So we know that those systems have been used for detection connected to offensive weapon targeting purposes for that long. I think it's a stepping the game up quite a bit. If in fact there is a similar system ground-based at the South Pole. And one thing you mentioned, I want to emphasize, neutrinos go straight through the Earth, matter, anywhere unimpeded. So the fact that it's on the South Pole doesn't mean that it can only pick up neutrino bursts that are coming from the direction of the South Pole out into space. It can pick it up circumferentially everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people make that error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually have an understanding. My ex-father-in-law passed away, but before he passed away, he had informed me that when he was in the Army way back when, in World War II, he was in very special detail that was working with first microwave line of sight radar. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Very special stuff. He was super top secret. They never left the country, and they were ordered to write letters as if they were in the European front.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize that these sort of electromagnetic fields and experimentation, these go back to the late 1800s and the early 1900s. If you look at this historically, this is why, I at some point, maybe in the near future, I want to work on a documentary that's a special 2-hour deep dive going back over 100 years on the sort of hidden electromagnetic and related technologies, because obviously they can be used to tap into the so-called 0 point or quantum vacuum and give us free energy and save the biosphere. But, I always say this as a medical doctor, emergency doctor, that you can take a knife to put butter on your bread or to slice someone's throat. And unfortunately, the latter is what's been going on in these covert programs, because they've all been hoovered up like a giant vacuum cleaner into covert unacknowledged special access projects and developed for military purposes. And this is an enormous problem, because most of those sort of systems, by the way, if you bring something like this up to someone, in the White House or even most directors of the CIA and or members of Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee, they know absolutely nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, I mean zero about this. That's a problem. I mean, it's a huge problem because there's no oversight on it. So tell us a little bit more of what your research into this has uncovered, and any other people that you've stayed in touch with who have still worked in that facility, and what the status of it now, 10 years on.
I think it's perfect where you were just at, because I think the reason those people are ignorant about these types of projects is because of compartmentalization of information. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, because here I am, somebody who actually wintered at the South Pole Station, and from a crew. I mean, these are limited numbers of people on the planet that do this. And even of that crew, I'm one of the few that was able to see through the compartments. So yes, I've stayed in contact with people, because a lot of this has been getting in touch with folks and saying, hey, you know what? You remember that time that such and such happened?
Yes.
And we had to respond, and this was what we were told, and this was what was going on. What if we look at it this way? I need to talk to you. So a lot of that has happened. I've absolutely been in touch with a lot of the hands from my crew. One of the main reasons that I'm coming forward is because I've maintained that contact, and I do believe these people have been negatively impacted by what I believe are now called directed energy weapons. That people have suffered. There are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works.
Right.
And then also, I believe that because we had a potential to go offensively, I believe there's a potential for us to have been attacked.
Now, what kind of symptoms you're referring now to? Sort of biological and brainwave problems that people have had. I know we talked about this before when I first had a conversation with you. Can you go into that? What sort of sequela, we'd say in medicine, have people experienced?
A lot of it has to do with the list of things that are coming out now on the Havana syndrome list. Mm-hmm. So I apologize for not having all the medical terminology correct.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm just dealing with the folks and what they're telling me.
Right.
They're having memory issues. They're having a lot of trouble sleeping. Mm-hmm. They're having issues with temperature rise out of nowhere. These things are all peculiar to me. I mean, I'm not trying to justify it or anything. I'm just telling you what people are griping, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. It's kind of why I came out of the shadows, because I was noticing this in my life and my crew, but now I'm seeing things like, since last we spoke, we have the Directed Energy Threat Emergency Response Act has come out as a House resolution. The Department of Defense has now has issued guidelines for their personnel how to report these symptoms internally so they can take care of it appropriately.
Right.
So this stuff's getting very real in just the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a lot in the mainstream news. Those of you who haven't heard about this, our embassy in Havana had a lot of personnel that had some kind of a directional energy weapon targeted them. There's been more recent ones in other countries at various facilities, and they have experienced this whole sort of constellation of symptoms, migraine, sleeplessness, emotional instability, big mood swings, and other physical problems, including what you're referring to, feeling like you're having a fever or what have you. Now, I remember this all goes back to this whole area of, let's call it forbidden science, that deals with a scalar, longitudinal, trans-dimensional physics is what it's been called, that deal with these kinds of electromagnetic fields. I liken it a little bit to people, working unwittingly near the Hanford reactor, and ended up getting radiation poisoning, or people who were near a downwind from the plumes of the atomic bombs being tested. There's a lot going on. And of course, the government never wants to admit that people are being injured by anything like this they're doing, because they don't even acknowledge the project exists. This is one of the big problems, is that if you're not going to even acknowledge the fact that these technologies are extant, that they're already all over the place, and because they're that classified, then obviously you're going to deny the symptomatology resulting from those technologies being deployed or used, even if the negative effects on people are secondary, not the intended one. Although I will say the so-called radionic psychotronic type systems are not a mythology. Those exist and have been developed quite thoroughly over the last 70, 80 years or more, and are also weapon systems.
There's a phrase in the military when they come with systems that maintain plausible deniability, and they say things like plausible deniability must be maintained.
Yes, right.
That means when there's collateral damage and fallout, plausible deniability will be maintained. They're not going to discuss what happened. There will be a cover story. You'll get some swamp gas spiel.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So what else have you discovered? I know you mentioned there was one supervisor who was there, a woman who became, even while you were there, became seemingly unhinged.
You just read my mind. That was right where I was going. Our station manager made the news when we were there. This is all referenceable. She was having great issue, I would just say. We'll put it that way. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I'm a winter rover South Pole expert, and from my knowledge and experience of being a winter rover at the South Pole, she seemed to be in the throes of what is medically called winter rover syndrome. They've done studies. There's a certain mechanism of failure to the psyche that occurs typically when you go down the wrong path there, I guess to say. And she seemed to be in that situation. And at the time, she was under the impression, I believe, that she believed she had a stroke. But it turned out that it didn't seem she had a stroke. I believe that she believed it, but I think this was, again, an impact from something that occurred during our winter season there, that she and others, there was an event that negatively impacted everybody. We had a drill. There was a drill out by our radio systems, our radio array, and it was her idea to set up a drill. We had all kinds of response teams, fire teams, medical teams, and the idea was in the harsh climate to test all of our equipment and get out there. Long story short is either A, that equipment wasn't properly isolated by accident or on purpose, or some other thing was going on, and I still don't know. But that event messed up a lot of folks.
Oh, okay.
And the powers that be want to call it a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's just one singular event that I know that it wasn't as presented. People were negatively impacted. Nobody was really talking about it. There was a lot of compartmentalization, and I would say misinformation and disinformation being spread around, because to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened there, and I'm still looking into it.
Okay. And how many were there other people at the base when they switched the system on and this Christchurch, New Zealand devastating earthquake happened that sort of sensed like, oops, there's something related here?
I would not have been in that info stream at that time.
Okay. But since then, you've learned of folks who...
Yes, that absolutely, that was the thought going on. They were very aware. It was rather rapid, I think when you pull the trigger on something like that, you kind of know the target that you're looking for, and whether you hit the bullseye or on the paper, you're still aware.
So this array is 2 miles deep. How far across is it?
Oh, it's I would say a couple of miles across.
Okay.
Would be my best guesstimate. I don't have it on this map here. I'm sorry. Okay. I have a different map.
Yep. Well, the reason I bring that up, this is not something a lot of times I'll have military and intel or contractors come forward with information, and I sit on it until I get another point of corroboration. Because, you don't want something to just be purely apocryphal one-off, as we say in science, an N of one. So some years ago, I was given a lecture in Phoenix. And, this commonly happens. There were hundreds of people there. And at the end of it, there was this middle-aged man with 2 people with him, who were clearly with him as friends, protectors, who waited till everyone cleared out. And he told me that he had been in Alaska and deployed on a ship that was under contract. It was a private corporation under contract with the National Security Agency. And this ship had a special scalar electromagnetic system on it. And they went down to the area off of Indonesia over that subduction zone. And when they turned that system on, it caused that massive earthquake. I think it killed 250,000 people. And he was so disturbed by this that he went off the grid, got an old car without GPS, drove from Alaska to Phoenix with these 2 security people to hand this information off to me. He was shaken. There's no question that he was telling me the truth of what he knew about this. Now, again, whether that was an intentional or an incidental event, the implication from him was that they were testing a weapon system that could destabilize unstable areas of the Earth's crust and put them past the tipping point for an earthquake. And when you told me this story about this system being switched on and the Christchurch earthquake, I put that in there with this information from this guy who was on the ship and witnessed this happen, who took a lot of time and trouble to try to hand this information off to us.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.